This past weekend, I've been reading a book called Empire of Exiles by Erin M. Evans. This is book one of a series. I think it's fairly self-contained, like it does leave a number of unanswered questions, but I think it can kind of be read on its own. So a little bit about the world before I get into this story. So sometime in the history of this universe, like the many different nations came under attack by creatures that they refer to as changelings. So it's a little bit similar to the typical lore on changelings from like Fae mythology, where they were shapeshifters that replaced people that people knew. So like they would suddenly not act like themselves, and they caused a lot of destruction and stuff wherever they went, or at least that's how the stories go. And as these various nations began to fall apart, their people escaped and eventually ended up somewhere called the Sumila Empire. Like this empire took them all in, and then their like salt and iron mages created a wall that surrounds the empire and protects them from changelings, because salt and iron are like the two materials that can cause them harm and can be used as a defense against them, as well as a way to determine like when someone is a changeling. So since then, the empire has pretty much thrived within these boundaries. Like people don't go out, people don't come in, but they have been doing fairly well. Like they found a way to coexist like across these various cultures and races that are represented in these nations that came together. But about 20 some years before the start of this story, the leaders of one of these sub-nations, I guess, led a rebellion. Like they tried to claim the throne, and they used, for instance, like some magic or related like changelings and stuff to actually do it, and they were ultimately unsuccessful, but it's left some scars, I guess, on like the people and on the structure of things, since there were certain agreements made, I guess, across these different nations when they came together. But anyways, I'll leave it to the story to explain that part. So one of the main characters is called Quill. Like he is an apprentice in their group that deals with the legal system. Like he also does a lot of work that I would consider like what scribes do, like where you deal with legal documents and stuff like that. But he is sent to retrieve some artifacts from the Imperial Archives. So the archives is where a lot of important like artifacts, texts, documents, etc. are kept. It's also where the Empire has a lot of their, I guess we would call like mages, whatever, like they refer to them as specialists. So specialists in the archives are people who have some type of affinity for an element. So for instance, someone with a bronze affinity would be able to manipulate bronze, like, and how much they can do this would depend on how strong their affinity actually is. But anyways, Quill is pretty fascinated by all this in general. Like he's super excited to be sent on this mission, since he has always kind of wanted to see like the inside of the archives, even though like the stuff he's been sent to retrieve strikes many people as a little bit fishy, since they have ties to the unsuccessful rebellion from more than 20 years ago. Well, of course, he doesn't really know much about any of this, and it's not something that he spends too much time thinking about. Unfortunately, like on his way back to I think it was the place where like his teacher and his friend and stuff were staying, like he sees his friend murder a whole bunch of people at the Lord's house, and this is really shocking to him, not only because it's his best friend, but because he feels like these actions and events that follow, like none of it make any sense. Like he insists that these things are not things that his friend would do, and he sets out to try to prove this, I guess, to try to figure out what was going on, or whether if it's true that maybe he just didn't know his friend like as well as he thought. So that's character number one. Character number two is one of the specialists that Quill met when he was in the archives. Like she is an ink specialist, and well, she's mainly pulled into this because of her interactions with Quill, and also because her affinity is actually somewhat unusual. Like, her people, like, she's from a race that has, like, sounds like 3 eyes and horns. Like, it doesn't really spend too much time describing their appearances. I'm not entirely clear, for instance, what kind of horns, like, where they're located. I mean, obviously it's on her head, but I don't know exactly what that's supposed to look like. But anyways, like, ink is not an affinity that her race historically has any ties to, so she's still trying to figure out what her place is, I guess, in all this. And, you know, where she wants to be. Like, she thinks she likes being at the archives, but she's not sure she fits in there either. But she definitely doesn't fit in at home with her own people, who definitely don't understand, like, the kinds of things that she can do or the kinds of dangers that are posed by her particular abilities, because specialists kind of need people to keep them grounded, because it's possible to lose yourself, I guess, to the thing that you have an affinity for, and that could eventually cause you to die. Let's see. So character number 3 is one of the senior archivists. So she is a generalist. So generalists, unlike specialists, don't, I think, have affinities. Instead, they work with the people who do in order to help, like I said, keep them grounded. It sounds like they, I guess, help them with managing their abilities and all the other work that goes on in the archive. But she's very well respected by pretty much everyone, but at the same time, she's harboring a lot of secrets that very, very few people know about, but she's also constantly afraid will continue to haunt, like, her and, like, the people that she comes to care about. Like, her history actually traces back to the rebellion that occurred 20-some years ago, and she has ties to some really important people that she doesn't want people to know about. But, you know, because of the murder and the strange circumstances surrounding it, like the things that Quill saw and the irregularities in some of the witness testimonies, she finds that maybe she can't really hold on to her secrets anymore, because it might relate to stuff that she knows and that could endanger, like, the Empire and the people that she cares about. So the last character it follows is one of the police. So in this world, they're referred to as vigilance. So he's the person who is assigned to the murder case, and, you know, first notices the strangeness, like, in the testimonies that people gave. Like, it seems like everything can be tied up really neatly, but his gut tells him that he's missing something, and he's the kind of person who trusts his instincts. It sounds like he actually used to be a thief, but he, well, believes in using, like, his abilities and his knowledge and his particular skills and stuff to try to make the world a better place. So he's not willing to let go of this case, even though there are people, like, in authority telling him just to take the obvious answer and let it go. So yeah, like, the story follows these 4 characters. It starts with the murder and gets more and more complicated as it delves into the history of the rebellion, the changelings, and everything else, like, surrounding this empire, I suppose, and its history. And like I said, it does leave some unanswered questions, but it also is pretty self-contained as far as the mystery murder investigation part of it goes. Let's see. So, like, I actually had found the story really interesting. Like, I was a little unsure about it at first, because it's one of those that began with, like, the brother of the guy who led the rebellion going to see him before he was going to be executed. I've seen a number of stories that begin that way, where you have, like, you know, someone visiting someone else in jail to get, quote unquote, to the truth of what happened. And it tends to be a framing of the story that does not interest me terribly, but this story felt like it actually had a really good reason for doing this, and it also wasn't like a looking back, because the bulk of the story was in the present day, whereas these intervening bits on the visit were in the past. So a little bit different, I guess, from other stories I've seen that structured it this way. And I really liked the mystery elements. Like, I think it's difficult to do mysteries that have like strong magical tools and stuff involved. And I think the story does a really good job of following that, going through like the steps of people learning and digging into all these really complicated things that are related to each other. Something I did not like. There wasn't really anything I didn't like, but I will say that there were moments where it kind of annoyed me that characters jumped to conclusions, or where things got more complicated than they had to be just because people lied when they, in my opinion, didn't really have to, or refused to talk when they really should have. But on the bright side, I guess, none of those conflicts, I guess, lasted very long. Like the story, like for instance, when people jumped to conclusions, they figured things out or were open to changing their minds and stuff quickly enough that it didn't become a source of major irritation to me.